From Relay FM, this is Connected, episode 203. I'm your host, Stephen Hackett, and this episode is brought to you by our fine sponsors, Hover, Pingdom, and Inboard Technology. And I am joined, drumroll please, by my friend and yours, Michael
Federico Vitici. Hi. Ciao, Stephen. It's Federico here from Italy.
Hey, buddy.
Hi, I'm back. I'm back, baby! And Federico isn't. So there was a falling out. And
don't say that. That's not true. Federico's computer exploded.
You don't know all of my conversations. Yeah, so here's the thing. Federico was going to be on today's episode, and then he was going to be away for a couple of weeks, and we have some fun stuff planned for the next 2 weeks because he's taking his vacation like I had mine. But unfortunately, Federico's audio interface basically exploded 2 minutes before we started recording today, so Federico couldn't make it. So we will soldier on. I am freshly caffeinated, so it's going to be a good show. Should we just jump right into follow-up?
Let's jump right into follow-up.
We're in follow-up now. We've jumped in.
So we spoke about mobile Safari and this question about is it hold back the iPad because it's not like full desktop browsing capable, right? There are things that you can do in a desktop browser you can't do in mobile Safari. And we had a bunch of feedback around the same question, and I wish we had talked about it on the show. But Safari does have a option that says request desktop site. So if you long press on like the refresh button, you have two options. You have request desktop site, and then you have load without content blockers, which can also be helpful if you use a content blocker, maybe a page is acting up. But a lot of people are like, well, doesn't that get you kind of where you need to be? And it can help sometimes, but I think most of the things we were talking about and things we had in mind in that segment were things with like interaction. So like some sort of user interface on a website that doesn't work on mobile. Like, so that can be, it can kind of get you there, but usually not all the way. So
the thing is, the request desktop site doesn't really change. It actually sometimes introduces new problems because I have found that if a company is sending you to a mobile site on an iPad, it typically means their desktop site really doesn't work on an iPad. Like, they're sending you to the mobile site for a reason is typically what I've found. Like just today, I was playing around with shortcuts and I was just like setting up like a tell me what my calendar events thing is, right? And I found like a weird bug in shortcuts where I had a Google Calendar and an Apple Calendar, both with the same name. And the Google Calendar just like I set it up with just some recurring events to add some things with Todoist. And it was doing this thing where even though I said I wanted the Apple Calendar, it was giving me results for both in shortcuts because the calendars were named exactly the same. Kind of weird. That's what I expect was happening. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just go and change the name of the Google Calendar because I never look at it or use it anyway. So I'll just change the name of that entry in the calendar. And I was trying to go to the like google.com/calendar website, and I would go to get given the mobile page. I hit the desktop button. It would show me hey, this is new. We've changed the UI. And you press OK, and it would take me back to the mobile site. And I was just in this loop. I couldn't get out of it. So, like, I find this stuff a lot. Google stuff does this. Twitch's site does this. They send you to the mobile site. Because if you go to the desktop one, it kind of has a fixed view, which is kind of zoomed in, and you can't scroll. Like, this is a lot of the problems that actually new ones get introduced with the desktop site thing. So, it typically doesn't help, honestly. I enjoyed you guys' discussion on this one. I actually will just put my stake in the ground and say that Apple needs to fix this. Like, Apple needs to find a way to solve this problem rather than leaving it on website creators to do. Like, I feel like this is something that Apple needs to fix. Like, however they do it, they could fix it. Like, they could even have some weird mode where you do bring up, like, a little on-screen trackpad as, like, in the same way that they add a request desktop site button, which is a weird button to add anyway, right? Like, that's weird when you think about it, to add that button. You're making like you're like conceding to something by adding that button. So they should find some way to make it easier to use all these things when you're on an iPad. That's what I would like to see anyway. But that's where if I was going to kind of draw my line in the sand, I would say that Apple need to find a way to fix this, as opposed to hoping the rest of the internet catches up.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think it's on Apple, and they have a desktop browser. That's the thing that kills me. It's not like they got to go out and build one. They have one. just shoehorn it in there, and you'll be set.
I agree with you. Like, even though you're kind of making a joke, right? But like, obviously, no one's expecting Apple to just take the macOS browser and put it on the iPad. But they can go a long way to making them closer, I'm sure.
Right. I mean, I'm not saying bring the whole thing over, but they've got the engine. Like, that's, they've got the renderer, and you would think a bunch of that's cross-platform. I agree. I think it's an Apple thing. So
it won't be a problem when all the apps are iOS apps anyway. So, it'll be fine. That's when they'll fix it. So you just got back from your own trip, but because you're committed to the show in a big way, you didn't take any time off. You went to Detroit, Michigan, to the Henry Ford Museum because you're a big fancy museum boy.
Is that a thing? I'm not sure that should be a thing.
Yeah. You are one of them.
Yeah. So I spoke about it on last week's show. Henry Ford had a maker fair. I went up to friend of the show, John Voorhees. And frequent guest of Connected now.
Very frequent recently.
He's been on more than anyone. He's been on 3 times. I think that's the record.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. Underscore used to come on a lot to explain things we couldn't understand.
That's true. I have to go back in the archives and see. So John came up too. So it was fun to see him. So we went to the Maker Fair, and then I did some speaking. But the iMacs are there. The 13 iMac G3s I donated were on display. So I did a little travel video on YouTube, kind of showing the trip, showing the iMacs, and which was a lot of fun to put together. And it was fun to see them. And I had a really, really good time. So I also met several listeners. Several listeners came to both the Saturday and Sunday session that I gave. So
I didn't know you were doing 2 days. Did you do the same talk 2 times?
Yes.
Man, you're a boss. That's a difficult thing to do.
And there were people in both of them. It was awesome. So if you were a listener and came up and said, "Hey, thank you," it was great to hang out with some people for a little while. It was a fun weekend, Myke. But I'm a homebody. I was glad to be back home, especially knowing that you'd be here. I don't want to miss.
I mean, you can't miss that. But you've buried the lead on this though. Your iMacs are part of a an exhibit now. That's serious.
It was a little surreal. I said in the video, I came across them accidentally. Like, I came in a side entrance in the museum. Apparently I wasn't supposed to, but I did. And so I was like, oh, I wonder where they are. And I look up and there they are. Like, it's like the first thing I see. And it's in a section about like translucency and transparency. And the iMacs are sort of the heart of that exhibit. And all 13 were out and had my name on a placard, which felt kind of good.
Yeah, that placard's hilarious. Do you have a picture of the placard anywhere, like that's online?
I do. Yeah.
All right, well, I want to put that in the notes because it's really funny to me because they list each Mac, right? They list each of them, and it's got your name with all of them. And I just wonder if they couldn't have just put a big like Stephen Hackett gave us these, and then just a list. It's really funny to me that you're the only person on that entire card, and you're listed multiple times. I find it kind of hilarious. I love it.
Yeah, I guess because I think in the paperwork they're listed as 13, in their individual donations, and so I guess that's how because each one has its own tracking number in their system. So my guess is,
and you would want to list them individually in case you need one of them for something, right?
Right.
You wouldn't want to list them as one individual exhibit, right? If you just want the blue one or whatever, right? Right. You just want the original. Mm-hmm. So, but yeah, it is. So yeah, it's very good. I'm very proud of you because this is a very weird and incredible thing to have something that you've done be put in a museum. I know you didn't make them, but you contributed to this permanent part of the Henry Ford Museum, which is no joke. But the funny thing is, this started as a dumb joke. That's what I love most about this. There was a dumb joke, which it expanded into a serious project, which is now a part of a museum. And I kind of love that. Mm-hmm. It was I have this funny idea for a video where I would eventually have all these iMacs, or however it started. I don't even know how it started, but it was just a silly idea. And now look where it's gone to. I think that's just kind of incredible.
Yeah, I put up a blog post. I'm trying to find it. Where I was like, oh yeah, it would be cool to like collect all 13. And I posted it like on a Saturday, and then they just started pouring in, and then they were all here, and then I couldn't keep them all, but it started as a thing. It's like, I'm just going to see if I could do this right, and it's a really fitting end. I couldn't be happier with the way this project ended. Like
there is no greater ending. There is no ending that is better than this. Like this is
and
it.
they're together, which was important to me.
You want your children to live together. You don't want them to get split up.
Yeah, I wanted them to be able to grow together.
Yeah.
So it was really cool.
Well, I'm very proud of you.
Thank you.
What is?
Well,
I see some more Mac stuff here, and I guess there's nothing we can do about it now. Like it's the summer, and that means that Mac stuff's happening. I guess
I took over Upgrade and did a whole Mac episode with Jason.
I rectified that very quickly.
Yeah, I saw that. This is I want to talk about Spect. It is a new Mac app from Stephen Frank, and I brought it up because we've talked a lot about file management and photo management over the years, and like using photos, or like all of us used to do more of this, of keeping everything in Dropbox and using Finder to like navigate our photos. And there are a couple of different apps on the Mac. One's called Loop. Spect is a new one that basically look at those folders and give you like a nice interface to manage them. And this is, from the ones I've seen and used, the nicest one. So if you are still using Dropbox or just Finder or something to manage your photos and not using iCloud Photo Library, Google Photos, this I think would be a nice tool to have at your disposal to help organize and manage things.
And also it is, I'm not trying to throw shade. It's kind of noteworthy to see a new Mac app. Like it just is just like a thing now where it's like you see a new Mac app, it's like, oh, it's a new Mac app. Right, like that doesn't happen very much anymore. Like even small utilities, or at least they don't necessarily break out, or they're not newsworthy in any way. But this is made by someone who has a great pedigree, right? So
yeah, totally.
And it's an interesting little thing. It's a very Mac-y looking app. Like it's very simple. But I think that's by design. So, yeah, as Pastor Boy in the chat room is noting, we probably shouldn't have spoken about it because it's photo management related, and it unfortunately means that he's going to have to shut that app down. Sorry, Stephen.
Sorry, Stephen. We're sorry.
We're big fans. We're big fans of your work. We're sorry we had to do this to you. Today's show is brought to you in part by our friends at Hover. Building your online identity has never been more important than it is in today's world. And with Hover, you can find the domain that shows the world who you are and what you're passionate about. If you have anything that you want to put on the internet, you want to be able to tell someone where to go to find it. And I heard this once, and I really liked it. Like, is a good way to kind of gauge if a name is good is if you tell it to somebody in a loud bar and they can find it. And I think this is especially true with URLs. Like, you want to be able to give somebody a URL that is easy to spell and makes sense, and you can be sure that people are going to be able to find what you want to send them to, right? Because if you have something online, you want people to find it. That's why it's there, typically. So you want to have a good domain name, and that's why you want Hover, because Hover have all of the tools that you're going to want to find that domain name that you need. Because if you're stuck, if you're not sure what to name it, you can type in some words into Hover, and they'll make a bunch of suggestions for you. Like they might add some different words on if just some domains are taken. And they also have over 400 domain name extensions that you can choose from, so you'll definitely be able to find something that is easily to be understood when it is heard, and people can go there. If you want to show off something that you're doing, if you want to show off some work that you've had, you want to have a presence online to be able to show that. And that is the great thing about Hover. They will be able to give you the domain name that you want or need to be able to put your project front and center on the internet. The great thing about Hover is they allow you to keep your domain separate from your hosting as well, so you don't have to be stuck with a service that doesn't meet your needs. And don't even just think about this. I know we focus on domain names for your website, but you may also want a domain name for your email. Personalized email addresses is another way to further your identity online. So you give someone a cool sounding email address, so you're not like, I don't know, like I'm looking around my desk, like Federico.italianguy at hotmail.com. You don't want that, right? You want like Viticci at macstories.net. That's a cool email. You should, be nice to Federico. He's a good guy. If you want to show the world what you're passionate about, Hover is there to help you make that first step. Go to hover.com/connected right now, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. Hover's a great company. They have wonderful customer support, no upsales. They have a clean user interface. I really, really love what they do. Hover.com/connected, and you'll get 10% off your first purchase. Thank you to Hover for their support of this show and Relay FM.
So there are a bunch of rumors, Myke, about upcoming iPad Pros. We have one saying that the 2018 models may drop the headphone jack because of Courage, and another one about smart connectors and Face ID. But let's start with the headphone jack thing. So they dropped it on the iPhone 7. Some people, like The Verge, are still very, very personally upset about it. I think the rest of us have more or less moved on. It's annoying sometimes, but not very often. But the iPad feels like a different thing. The phone, I could kind of see why they had to do it. I don't, you see iFixit take the thing apart. It's like, okay, I could see why you need the space. But the iPad is massive. There's not room in there for a little headphone jack. What's going on here?
I mean, I am still personally annoyed about the removal of the headphone jack on the iPhone. I'm not joking. Like, it isn't the point where, like, every time they release a new device, I'm not like, where's the headphone jack? But I've just never been personally content with the reason. Like, I don't think Apple never gave a reason, right? They were just like, we've removed it because we're courageous. Like, I know that's a meme, but that was, like, the reason. And people have claimed, every time I bring this up, and there's going to be people that are going to do it right now, people tell me it was to help with waterproofing, or they tell me it was to add a taptic motor. Nobody can prove any of those things, in my opinion. Like, they removed the headphone jack because it was just something that they wanted to do for whatever reason. But the reason, honestly, I stand by my original reason for this is they needed it gone from the 10 because they were constrained with what they wanted to put in the 10. So they just removed it on the 7 because the 10's the one they wanted to sell. They didn't want the 10 to be bogged down in the story of they removed the headphone jack. So they got rid of it on the 7 so that they had a runway leading up to the 10. That's what I stand by that reason. I 100% believe that's why they did it. I understand why they did that, but it still annoys me. Anyway, let's assume that the reasons that people give, waterproofing or more space inside of the device, are true, right? Let's just assume that. These are two things the iPad Pro doesn't need: waterproofing or more space inside of the case.
You don't want to use your iPad Pro in the tub safely?
I mean, I would love it, but it doesn't need it, right? Like, it just doesn't. You do not need to waterproof your iPad. Like, we're good. Like, we're fine. It's not a thing.
And we've sidestepped the conversation that there are plenty of products on the market with headphone jacks that are water resistant. I'm just going to sidestep that.
Yeah. I mean, like, that was rubbish, right? Like, Samsung, there are Android phones released every day that have headphone jacks that are waterproof, and Samsung were doing it before the iPhone 7 anyway, so... They had a great ad. I really liked their ad. They had like a wrapper pour champagne on the phone. It was really funny. I enjoyed that ad. It was one of Samsung's better ads. So if they do this, I am very keen to see what their reason is. And I expect the reason to just be bull. Like, honestly, I don't even think there'll be a reason. I think they will tout the original reason for the 7 of we live in a wireless world. Like, that's what I think the reason will be. And the reason that this will annoy me is it's because coming later on in the year or next year, they have a bunch of other Bluetooth headphones they want to sell me. And all right, like, it's a strategy thing, but I think it's a mistake. I think it's more of a mistake than the phone. Because I genuinely believe, like, iPads and over-the-ear headphones in traveling circumstances is a huge use of this device. And I think I will be personally really annoyed about it. Like, if probably more than the iPhone, because I just don't think that the iPad is really hurting for that space back. Like, and if they are designing a product where they're that tight, I may say, like, just think about it. Like, think about it. Like, do you need to? But anyway, this is all a rumor. I just want to say I think it's silly. I think that there are a lot of use cases for the iPad that will be a real shame. Like, a lot of musicians and DJs and stuff like that use this device. And I think it would kind of suck if that stuff was taken away. I know that you'd mentioned to me, because we were talking about this beforehand, that payment companies, you get those like the Square readers and stuff. Like, and that's the thing that still exists, but a lot of those are being replaced now for Bluetooth devices because of the chip technology.
Yeah, that's fading away.
Yeah, it would annoy. I mean, as you can clearly tell, like I maybe have a bee in my bonnet about this one, but I would just be real. I think that it would kind of be unnecessary. Like, and if they remove it from the iPad, then it's going from the Mac, right? Like, and if it doesn't, then I again will ask questions. Why is it still on the Mac? You know, but hey ho.
Yeah, I mean, the Mac definitely feels too far for all the like the professional audio reasons and stuff. Yeah, it may be still important on the iPad. The Mac has all of those and a lot more. The thing that came to mind for me, because I've been traveling a lot, is that I very often will use wired headphones on a plane with an iPad. In fact, I was doing that when we were getting these show notes together.
Yeah.
Not because I mean, yes, they sound better on a plane and stuff, but like if I'm on a long flight, I just don't want to like drain my AirPods and then they'd be dead when I get where I'm going, or like lose one on an airplane and then they're gone forever.
My AirPods don't last the trips that I take. Right? They don't. I have to do this thing at some point where I take one out and charge it and then put it back in again, and then take the other one out and charge it and then put them both back in again. And like, that's not ideal. Right? Like if I'm listening to something on my iPhone or whatever, listening to a podcast, and it's not an ideal situation. Like they don't last a full plane journey for me. So it would be very frustrating to have that. Because then it's like, well, you know, I could at least have the headphones that I purchased be used in other places using my iPad. And it's like, well, now I've just wasted these headphones because now I can't plug them into anything because the dongle life is dumb. Right, like it's not a great solution plugging it into the Lightning port because then I can't charge it. And remember, I'm on a plane, so sometimes I need to. Anyway, so yes, we're in the weeds on this one, but you can clearly see it would frustrate me.
What if they replaced the headphone jack with like you had 3 Lightning ports? You had one for charging, one for pencil charging, and then one for your adapter. That's all the problem.
Make one of those USB-C, and then maybe we can talk.
Shh. We don't talk about that. There's also a lot of talk about the smart connector, and this kind of goes like in conjunction with the Face ID camera.
Yeah.
Because we're talking about like iPad orientation, right? So despite the printing and the Apple logo on the back, I think most people, especially if you have an iPad Pro, use iPads in landscape most of the time. Right? Yeah. We all rotate them occasionally. But if you got it in a keyboard case, it's going to be in landscape mode. And the Apple logo's on the side, and then the headphone cable's got to fall across the screen. It's a little strange.
The entire multitasking system is built around an iPad being used in landscape because it's just not that nice to use in portrait, right? Because you don't have the screen size. Like if you use apps, if you either use a keyboard or you use multitasking, you use your iPad in landscape probably most of the time. And if you do either of those two things, you own an iPad Pro. You know what? I feel like if you're spending a lot of time doing either of those two things on your iPad, you're probably using an iPad Pro. So the idea is that moving the smart connector somehow means that they're making it a portrait device, and people are drawing a line to Face ID. That's kind of where this is all going. But I think we need to uncouple these a little bit first. So let's park the smart connector discussion and now talk about Face ID. So people were saying, oh, they've moved the smart connector to the bottom because now the iPad is a portrait device because the Face ID sensor doesn't work in landscape, right? This is the argument that's being put forward here, I think, by a lot of people who have seen the rumors from Mac Kotaku, right, who said that the smart connector was moving to the bottom based upon supply chain discussions, as well as other things, which we'll get to. So I'm just going to say I really don't think this is the case. I do not believe that Apple would ship an iPad Pro where it had Face ID, but it only worked in portrait. Personally, I don't think they're going to ship an iPad Pro with Face ID that only works in one orientation anyway, either portrait or landscape. I don't think that that's what they're going to do. I think that if that was the case, they just wouldn't put it in. That's how I feel. Like, you just don't do it until you can do it in multiple orientations. And I've spoken about this, I think, on Upgrade a few weeks ago, and Federico brought it up for today's show as well. that there was a developer session during WWDC about the face detector API in iOS 12 supporting multiple faces. So this is how it gets that multiple looks, right, in iOS 12 on the iPhone 10. You get like, what do they call alternate look or something like that, where you can set like a second version of your own face, apparently, like as in Face ID. But it also supports multiple orientations. And they've shown some pictures of the face detector API being what they call orientation agnostic, and it can detect faces in multiple orientations. Now, I do have a question, which I haven't been able to get an answer for, is this the same technology that's utilized in Face ID? I'm expecting probably, right, because it is machine learning. It's all machine learning. And Face ID, there isn't a problem with the sensors that can only read it in one orientation. It is what the machine learning algorithm is able to extract, right? Like, that's my understanding. It's like it just provides this information, and then the system says, yes, it's a face, but it only works in portrait right now. Well, the face detector API has changed, and it now recognizes in multiple orientations. So in theory, this should say that we will be able to get this in the future, and that, but then I ask a question of, well, why isn't this in iOS 12 on the iPhone? Because that hasn't changed. So I don't know. I don't have an answer to that.
Yeah, I mean, maybe it is one of those features that it shows up in iOS 12 on the phone when the iPads.
Well, it could be an iOS 12.1, right? Because the iPads might ship in November or something like that.
Yeah, you never know. I don't know enough to say for sure this is the same thing. I mean, on the surface of it, it looks like it would be.
Yeah.
And it would be kind of an Apple-y thing to do, like, oh, like, you know, the new iPad supports this, but if you have an iPhone 10, it does it too, you know, like bringing that back to...
it could be an iPhone 11 feature, right? Yeah, that's a good point.
I mean, yeah, it could be that there's like not even a fully second generation Face ID platform, but like a, you know, Face ID 1.5. You know, it's just a little tweak to the hardware that makes this possible.
Yeah.
And it's only on the new phones and iPads.
Maybe. I mean, I don't know how all this stuff works, but it might require some additional processing power to be able to do it. I don't know. Like maybe some new version of Metal that only runs on the 12X or something. Like, we don't know, right? But there could be a technical reason for it. But that I hadn't thought of that. That like, yeah, it might just ship on the new phone. It's like that is a feature of the new phone. Would be a weird feature to have, right? Because it's kind of pointing a flaw in your system. But hey ho, I'm sure they could do it in some other way, which could be interesting. So let's go back to the smart connector. So I really find it hard to believe that Apple is going to make a smart keyboard for portrait orientation.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So let's assume there's a couple of different things that could be going on here, right? That it could be a second connector for other accessories is one potential option. Right, there could be there was this thing on 9 to 5 Mac of this CAD system, and it's like, well, it actually doesn't really look like the smart connector as we know it. It actually is like this weird cutout, and it's on the back. So let's say it's on the back, but in portrait orientation. What if the new smart keyboard is actually a case, or there's like this plate that goes on the back of it, and it allows for a adjustable angle now. Like it might have some kind of like, I don't know, like a hinge or something, and then the connector just goes fixed on the back of it, or there could just be a second smart connector. There could be many different things, but like I really doubt that Apple are going to ship a portrait orientation keyboard, or they won't ship a keyboard with the iPad Pro. Like I don't see any of these things happening, which just tells me that there's a couple of different things going on here. One, this is all wrong, or two, it's partly correct. The other part of it's being completely missed off, which is typically what happens, right? It's like we get this stuff on the face of it, and we're like, well, logically, with the information that we have been provided, it would seem this. But then when they show it off, it's like, oh, right, we didn't see that part because we didn't have that information because nobody really knows what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, this render this is all based on is like really generic, and I mean, you can make a case that that's not a smart connector, that's a Touch ID sensor. I mean, it's not that, but it's a very vague artwork, and so I don't know how much we could draw from it. But I agree with you. Portrait keyboard would be weird. They did that initially, and it was super strange. And I tend to think that if this is a smart connector, it's either a second one and they have some sort of new accessory coming, or it is to make something like the smart keyboard, like you said, adjustable or more useful somehow, not a radical change in direction.
Yeah, or maybe this other thing on the back isn't even a smart connector. Like it's something completely new, right? Like it is a new thing that they have for this device, which we don't know about yet. In the same way that we didn't know what the smart connector was when it was rumored, right? Like what is this thing that's on the bottom? Nobody knows what it was for, right?
Right.
Like who knows what it could be? But I'm irrespective of all of this because I have my own beliefs about what they're going to do, right? Seeing all of this stuff, though, makes me excited because it seems like there's going to be some really big hardware changes. Like, I'm sure that there's going to be some big changes, but I personally, my belief on it, and I would be super surprised if I'm wrong, is that Face ID will work in landscape and I will still have a keyboard in landscape, right? And whatever it takes to get me to those points is like whatever it is. But I'm just super excited to see that they're not even just bringing the bezels thinner on these iPads. Like they're doing a bunch of other stuff as well, which makes me excited, right? Because these are the devices that I use every day that I love, that are my computers. So I'm super excited about it. And about the screens. So the rumor, all of the stuff that went with this rumor, I mean, because obviously it's going to be no home button. We know that, right? Like we know that there's going to be a notch. Like we can see all that stuff in iOS now. Like you can see it in iOS 12 what they've done on the iPad. Like you can see the changes. But the rumors also indicate that both devices are going to get larger screens, but will be physically smaller. That is exciting to me. Like I think that's really great. I mean, maybe that's why they say they get rid of the headphone jack, right? Because this device is smaller. It's like, it accidentally cut the headphone jack off. You know, like
it got sanded down.
Yeah, what are we gonna do? End. It's still in there. The port got sanded off. Such a shame. I still won't buy that. But that makes me excited too, right? Bigger screens, smaller devices. Like, yeah, I love the sound of that. That's everything I want.
So do I. And depending on where that ended up, I think I could be swayed back to the bigger iPad. I'm using the 10.5 right now. But who knows?
No, what will happen is you'll buy the big one and you'll use it for 2 months and you'll sell it and buy the small one.
That's pretty much what will happen.
Or you'll buy the small one, you'll sell the small one and buy the big one, then you'll sell the big one and buy the small one.
And then just go back to the Newton.
How's your second MacBook Pro doing, by the way?
It's great.
Great. Okay, good news. Maybe we'll talk about that in a bit. Should we take a break?
Let's take a break, Myke.
I'm very excited about this because we have a new and exciting sponsor today, Inboard Technology. They are the geniuses, the genii behind the motorized M1 skateboard. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, we're being sponsored by an electric skateboard today. Inboard's flagship M1 e-board is set apart from the pack with its innovative, industry-leading features and its sleek yet rugged design. The board has the glide of a traditional skateboard with the power and freedom of an electric motor. You can ride long after the sun goes down because it's the only electric skateboard that has integrated LED lights on the front and a tail for a safer ride, so you can see a little bit and people can see you. It has the world's first truly swappable battery for an electric skateboard. You can just put an extra battery in your bag and swap it while on the go, so you don't need to awkwardly find a charger in a coffee shop. And the Inboard Vision mobile app controls every aspect of the board and even allows your mobile device to be used as a throttle. It provides regular firmware updates for your M1 for the highest performing torque, hill climbing efficiency, and more, making the M1 totally future-proof. You can seriously upgrade your commute with one of these boards. Forget spending ages stuck in traffic or looking for a parking space. Just pick up your board and head to work. And if your commute is just fine, maybe you want a fun way to get around the neighborhood, and it's great for that too. But look, listening to me talk about this while sitting in my studio, that's no good. So why don't we cut to Stephen Hackett, who I believe is standing outside riding his electric skateboard right now.
All right, so I am out front of my house, getting ready to take my inboard out for a spin. I was not really a skateboarder before this, but the inboard gives you all the confidence you really need. The board is very smooth. The wheels just seem to glide right over small debris, cracks in the concrete. It's really very, very comfortable. And it just makes you feel alive. I like going fast. I like riding my bike fast. I like fast go-karts. The inboard makes that experience a lot easier to attain because you're out in the open getting lots of fresh air, feel the breeze. It's a whole lot of fun.
So whilst I wait for Steven to return back in from somewhere outside in Memphis, let me tell you how you can get one of these with a fantastic discount. For a limited time only, save $100 on your purchase of the M1 eBoard by going to inboardtechnology.com and using the code CONNECTED100 at checkout. Get the board, try it for 14 days, and if it's not for you, just send it back. With their easy return policy, if you ever wanted to try out a motorized board, now is the time to do it. So that's Inboard Technology, INBOARD technology.com, and use the code CONNECTED100 to save $100 for a limited time only. And they don't just ship to the US, they ship to many places around the world, so go check it out right now. You won't regret it. Our thanks to Inboard Technology for their support of this show and Relay FM. How you doing? You feeling good?
Good. A little sweaty now?
Yep.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Oh, man. I have one of these things sitting right here next to me. It just arrived. I'm so excited to try it out. Very excited. All right, so Apple results. I mean, I want to touch on this because I feel like we have to touch on this, right? Because it's a big thing, but it's never massively exciting. But I want to run through the numbers just so people can hear the numbers in case they've missed it. I feel like it is our duty to report on it. And then there's a couple of areas that I wanted to touch on a little bit with you to get your opinion. So here are the headlines. Are you ready?
I am ready.
$53.3 billion in revenue, up from $45.4 billion year on year. $11.5 billion in profit, up from $8.7 billion. 41.3 million iPhones sold, up from 41.0 million the year before. 11.6 million iPads sold, just up from 11.4 million. 3.7 million Macs sold, down from 4.3 million, the only thing that's down in this list. $9.55 billion in services revenue, up from 7.27 billion. So basically, everything is up except Macs, which is down. And that's year on year, not from previous quarters. We'll get to the Mac stuff. First thing to touch on, iPhone. It's the only thing that's really important, honestly, in the earnings report. So there's a couple of things here. So that is not a decline. It is an increase, but a small increase. It's like a very minuscule increase, really, right? It's like 0.3 million units sold. So the sales didn't go down, but they are mostly flat. But that goes against a lot of the reports that the iPhone X is dead. Where it gets even more interesting is that revenue went up 20% year on year. So not only is the iPhone X selling, it's also selling greater than the other phones. ASP is up, so the average selling price is up year on year. So it shows that people are buying the most expensive phone, even though maybe Apple isn't doing gangbusters on the amount that they're selling. They're still selling an incredible amount of phones, and people are buying the more expensive ones.
Right. And in a world where Apple may be reaching or being near to reaching market saturation with their phone, the way you have growth is that average selling price moving up. And it's so interesting. I feel like every quarter since the iPhone X has been out, right before the release, some analyst says, oh, hey, the 8 has knocked the 10 off the top. They're selling more 8s than anything else. And we saw that last quarter. We saw it this quarter. And Apple really takes that head on and says, no, the iPhone X is the best-selling iPhone. And in fact, it's been the best-selling iPhone ever since we launched it. And I think that says a couple things. I think, one, some of us, I'll count myself in this, we're a little nervous that the price was going to drive some people away, and it turns out that does not seem to be the case. It seems to be that either the iPhone X, because it has a new design or new technology, something about it makes people willing.
It's a really good-looking phone.
It is really good-looking, and if you look, I actually just saw a friend's 8 last night and handled it for a second. It's like, this feels old. Like, it feels like a 6. Like, the 8's a great phone, and that's the phone I tell most people to buy, like and people ask me for advice, but it's that old body style. It's the last of its kind, more than likely, and it shows a little bit. And so I think people are drawn to the 10. What'll be interesting for me to see, say that the iPhone 10 and 10 Plus, whatever the next ones are, right? If they retain this price point, will the ASP hold steady? Will it go up if the Plus is even more? Like, where is the ceiling? Have they met the ceiling, except that the new design is so exciting, people are willing to spend a little bit more one time? Is this the new normal? That'll be something to look at in the future, what that average selling price does once these old world phones, with home buttons and chins and foreheads, once those kind of phase out of the line. Do we go back to a world where the ASP is lower? Can Apple continue to charge these premiums if all the phones look like this? Lots of questions, right? Because what's so interesting about this phone cycle is that they've broken every single pattern that they had. There was not a 7S. There was an 8. It's the first time they've had two flagships, right? That they had 3 new phones in total, the 8, the 8 Plus, and the 10. This is new territory, and if rumors are to be believed, this year is going to be just as nutty with different things coming in at different sizes and price points. So I'm curious to see how this holds up, and if anything can really hurt Apple financially, like from a stock perspective, it'll be this iPhone ASP sliding back down.
So here's the thing. I agree with you, right? Proof is in the next revisions, right? Like what happens with the new phones. Now, the rumors suggest all new phones, right? Like all new look, all new phones, right? Which is exciting.
Yeah.
I think Apple are very confident because their guidance is $60 to $62 billion for the next quarter. So the beginning of the iPhone quarter. It's not their biggest quarter of the year, right? That's Q1.
Yeah. Well, that depends, too, when the iPhone goes on sale. There are times where the iPhone is like basically the last week of the quarter, so it doesn't make necessarily a big impact.
It must be making a difference because they're expecting a very big jump. They're expecting a basically $10 billion jump year on year.
It's all new Macs. They got new Macs coming, man. It's going to be the new MacBook Pro.
I have a good point that I'm trying to make here.
I'm sorry.
They're so year on year for Q4 2017 to Q4 2016, right? So when the iPhone debuted, right? The new new iPhones went on sale, let's say, because I don't think the 10 was involved in that one. It was a $6 billion year on year increase that they did. They are guiding their guidance is $10 billion potentially, and Apple always comes under their guidance, or at least has a very good history of that. So so we can expect, I don't know, like an $11-12 billion increase year on year.
They think something is going to be a big deal this fall.
They're very confident in the iPhones. I mean, because it has to be the iPhones. Nothing else can generate that sort of money.
Air power.
They're like, we'll sell one to every single person who has an iPhone
on the planet.
That's a lot of money, right? So, whilst I appreciate the jokes, that was the point that I wanted to make.
No, it's a really good point, Myke, and you're right. Apple is conservative when they give that guidance, because when companies lose value, it's when they miss their guidance, and Apple plays that a little safely.
Yeah, I think we can expect all the phones will go on sale in September this time around. They're not going to wait for a November one. I don't think they ever wanted to wait until November for the 10. It just took longer than they had. So that's kind of where I think that big things are going to happen. And yes, I agree. If the ASP changes, it would be a shame for them. But I think they're going to do so much money and so many units sold that will be forgotten about, even if it goes down, right? I think that they will absolutely knock it out of the park with the raw numbers. So that's the iPhone 10 was a success, right? Apple weren't lying when they were saying calls that it was like the best selling phone. It's so interesting to me, especially Bloomberg. They publish these articles an hour before that is their guidance, and recently it's been really wrong every time.
Yeah.
And I think that they need to spend some time thinking about that. Do they really want those page views an hour before or a day before or whatever about the iPhone 10 is dying?
Yeah. Well, the game is, if you're right, you're a genius, and if you're wrong, it gets buried in the other news.
It is always funny to me. I follow a couple of industry analysts on Twitter, not too many because I can't take too much of it, but a couple. And it's funny to me when they're Apple said it was this billion. My estimate was this. And it's like, are you just trying to show how smart you are? Like, I don't understand, right? Like, it's okay. You don't have to tell me. It's fine. Like, I can look it up if I need to. But they're like 6 different tweets of every different line. And it's like, I was $100,000 off. Like, I guess that's important, right? I guess that's what people pay them to do. But it just, as someone who's not in that world, it always seems funny to me. It's like, look how smart I am. But I guess that's their job, to show how smart they are. I don't know. It's
their job.
It's a strange thing. We should try that, industry analyst stuff. I guess we do it, but not with numbers, right?
No, and I'm going to talk about a point Jason made in his article about that in a second, but we're pretty product focused. Let's talk about the iPad for a second. I think there's some interesting stuff here. iPad revenue and units, if you look at the quarter averages, are stable. Like, it seems like the iPad is out of its dive and has landed at $4.9 billion a quarter, 11 billion units, looking at 4-quarter averages. The ASP, though, is down. And I think that's a pretty easy thing to explain this time, is that $329 iPad, they sold a bunch of them this quarter, probably the early part of the quarter to schools, and now just like to regular consumers. And the iPad Pro is now over a year old, and I expect the ASP on the iPad is very tied to new models. Maybe more so. Maybe even more so than other parts of Apple's business, because I think I don't know, like something about the iPad, like people don't upgrade as often, so it's like they wait to something new, and you see these spikes. But
plus, in the category, the price delta is huge.
Yeah.
Right, it's like the Pros are like 2 to 3 times more expensive than the
and
models
you have that
below.
in the Mac, but the Mac's a much smaller business, so it's not as noticeable.
Glaring. So I want to compare this with the Mac, because the iPad has stability and it's been stable for about a year. And if you look at the last year, I think what we're seeing now is Apple has finally found the stability in the iPad line, because the Pros were doing really great, and then they weren't going to have Pros come out in June, so they released the cheaper iPad for schools and etc., which has kept the iPad line stable. So if they keep following it along this route, the iPad line remains stable. The Mac is down, probably because there were no new Macs in June, but that shows that line, that market, that part of their business, they haven't got the stability in, right? Because if the $329 iPad didn't come out when it did, then the iPad line would be down because they didn't have any new Pros. So the stability in the line is coming from having a good strategy. And I think, if you look at the face of it right now, and I can't imagine many people would disagree with me, hardware strategy-wise right now, the iPad is stronger than the Mac. Like, where Apple is kind of putting their, like, with what they're releasing, the strategy seem like people in the iPad users are not going crazy right now because of X going wrong in the hardware, right? Like, maybe that happens in September, right? Depending on where the smart connector goes. But like, just kind of like a hardware strategy perspective, what's being released is making people happy and it's coming at the right time. And that is not happening for the Mac, right? Like, the MacBook Pros were met with a bunch of problems again. What the heck is happening with the MacBook Air? What is happening with the MacBook? Why is it still the same? Why is it still so expensive? Where's the Mac Mini? Where's the Mac Pro? Like, okay, where's the new 5K iMac? Like, all of this stuff doesn't seem to be on any kind of stable flow, where the iPad, even though we only have like 2 years of this happening, seems to be on a stable flow.
So I think there are a couple of things to unpack here. I think the distinction you've drawn between the iPad and Mac release cycles is an important one, where the iPad now is a sort of a TikTok release where you have consumer, and then you have professional, and then you have consumer, and the demand swings based on age, but then the other product is there to pick up the slack, I think is what you're saying. And I think that makes a lot of sense for the iPad. I think it explains what we're seeing. The Mac, on the other hand, has never really had that sort of cadence to its release, and maybe they should look at that because it's working for the iPad. But I think there's really 2 things that have impacted the Mac. Like you said, nothing new in June. The new MacBook Pros were, I believe, out of this quarter or at the very, very end of it. I think they were out. I think they were out of the quarter. So we're not seeing these new MacBook Pros.
Because this quarter ended in June.
Okay, yeah. So we didn't see those numbers in this report. The lack of updates, forget WBC, but like the lack of updates to the Mac line in general clearly are taking a toll, where you have people who would spend money on something. Like I'm one of them. Federico's one of them. I'm ready to buy a new Mac Mini. Federico's ready to buy a Mac Mini, and there's not a product for us. I think there are people who were probably holding off on maybe something like an iMac or even a MacBook Pro, waiting for that June update. It didn't happen. I don't know where the iMac 5K is. They basically internally are MacBook Pros. Like I don't know why those two devices aren't released at the same time. They were last year. They have been for several years. Something is going on there. And then of course you have, I think what the biggest problem is the consumer notebook. And lots of people have been talking about this. I don't want to retread all of it, but you walk in a store and you buy an iPad. My feeling is you probably know which iPad you're going to buy before you walk in.
Yeah, I don't think you're being met with a lot of surprise.
No, or if you walk in and talk to a sales associate for 5 minutes, you have two very clear paths and you go down one. You do not have that in the Mac line right now. Forget the desktops, because the vast majority of Macs sold are notebooks. Like just table the iMac, Mac Mini, iMac Pro, Mac Pro. Just get rid of them. Just in notebooks, if you walk in with $1,400 in your pocket to buy an Apple notebook, you have a bunch of choices and none of them are very compelling. You have the MacBook Air, which has all the ports you want, but is older, doesn't have a Retina screen, but it's cheap. It has incredible battery life, and I still think the MacBook Air has an amazing reputation among consumers. I can't tell you how many times people email me or in real life, looking to buy a notebook, and the question is usually phrased, should I just buy another MacBook Air? And I think that has real value to people, but the technology is not very good now. Then you've got the one-port MacBook, to your point, is too expensive for what it is. Most people, I would think, would maybe struggle with having a single port, or they don't want to buy an adapter, or they just want something bigger. The 12-inch screen just isn't big enough for them, let alone power.
Yeah, I think that choosing between the Air and the MacBook for a lot of people will be a very difficult decision to make.
I think so, but I think the MacBook Air wins for most people because it's a little
That's
bit
what
bigger
I mean,
and
right?
cheaper.
But it's ugly and old, and the screen isn't Retina. You know what I mean? And then but you've got this beautiful thing, but it hasn't got as many ports, and it's way more expensive. Like there's it's a difficult decision, I think, between those two products.
I think so, and then you have the 13-inch, what they call a MacBook Pro, but is not really a MacBook Pro except in form. It's got 2 ports, regular traditional function keys, and again is expensive for what it is. And so if you've got $1,400 to spend on an Apple notebook, it's a very difficult to know which is the right decision. And for some people, none of them are the right decision, right? For some people, what they really need is something more akin to the MacBook Air, but with modern internals.
Gosh, I mean, it's worse now, right? Because I'm still looking at the page. The MacBook and the MacBook Pro are the same price now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's making it even harder. Like, how do you choose between the two of those? That's a really difficult decision to make.
It's really frustrating. And I think, and there was a good conversation between Marco and John on the latest talk show episode about this. And I agree with what they said, that I think it's time for Apple to basically just upend this entire end of their notebook lineup. And maybe that means, I don't know what that means. Maybe it means the MacBook Air goes away and the MacBook becomes $1,000 and you add a second port. Maybe this 13-inch MacBook Pro gets adjusted somehow and is, sort of modernized in a way that makes sense. Whatever it is, the clarity that was once there is gone. And I think that's the core problem in the Mac lineup. Not that the Mac Mini hasn't gotten updated, even though it's annoying. Not that the Mac Pro is still a year out, but that's annoying. Not that the new 5K iMacs aren't out, but that's annoying. The core problem, and I think where they are hurting, is they are losing consumers because consumers don't have a good option. And so I think a lot of people feel like to get a good Mac notebook, they got to buy that entry level touch bar machine, which is $17.99. At that point, people just go buy a PC. People like you and me and people like our listeners, I will ride the Mac all the way down because I want to run Mac OS as long as possible. There are always people online, you run into these comments about like, well, the new MacBook Pro still doesn't work for me for XYZ, so I'm just going to go buy a Surface Book or something. That doesn't work for me because I want to run Mac OS.
I genuinely have no idea how people can make that decision. Like, it
I think people
my
do,
mind. No, I'm sure they do, but like, I cannot get in the mindset of like that Mac is too expensive. I'll just go buy a Dell. Like, they're so different. It's like, oh, that car doesn't work. I'll just go and buy a motorbike, right? Like, that there are so many things that are different between those two. Like, I know people do it. I totally understand it, but like in the same way, like I can't fathom someone who's just like, oh, I use Windows PCs. That MacBook looks pretty. I'll buy one of those. Like, it really, like, it boggles my mind. It's like, I'm just going to go and buy this one device instead of the other. It's really strange.
Just as an aside, I'm at apple.com/mac/compare. And the first bullet point for Mac Mini is highly energy efficient.
It's because electricity technology has moved on since the Mac was last updated.
We got rid of the hand crank in the back. So I hope that Apple has an answer to this, whether it is removing a model and changing the pricing, or like ideally, I think for me would be to have a new consumer model that replaces the Air, and you change some of the branding so it makes sense, and you have a machine like a Mac for the masses. And Apple just doesn't have one right now. Of course, you have the Pro angst around the MacBook Pro. I think we'll know next quarter if these MacBook Pros solve that or not. I think they probably will for most people because they're a lot faster. The keyboard seems to be mostly fixed. And at least if people are like me, I've just given in to the USB-C lifestyle and I bought a bunch of cables on Amazon. Like, maybe that initial angst has faded and we just have come to accept that these machines are what they are. So time will tell with that. But it really feels like that consumer Mac notebook quagmire is catching up with them.
Yeah, and like, here's the thing. I don't believe I'm smarter than the people making these decisions at Apple. I know they know this, and I'm very confident. I'm not saying that you.
No, man, we saved them. They listen to the show, and they're going to turn it around.
Oh, do you know what? We didn't even notice that point in our earnings report. So like, I'm really confident that they have an answer to this. Yes. We just haven't seen it yet, and for whatever reason, because things happen. We run companies. We know how things get delayed, right? Like. Yeah. And they're working at much different scale than we are. Things get delayed all the time. This is just what it's like when you run a company. And I'm sure that there's just something going on right now, which is kind of throwing things out of whack a little bit, and it will be taken care of. Like, I believe that. I genuinely do. Mm-hmm. But all I'm doing is, like, I'm looking at these numbers, and, like, this is why I think it's happening, right? Like, I'm trying to apply consumer thinking to the fact that people aren't buying the Macs as much as that. Because the Mac going down year on year is a rare thing to happen. I saw some statistic of like how many consecutive quarters it's been or something, right? Like where it's been up and there hasn't been a problem. It going down is a concern. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It shows something bad has happened. And for whatever reason that was, it's something that Apple doesn't want, which means that they will have a thing that they think is going to fix it. So that's kind of where I sit on this.
And it's not all doom and gloom. Like, the average selling price is up, probably because there's not a good consumer option and people buy the MacBook or the MacBook Pro. But yeah, clearly something needs to give. And I'm to borrow a term from you, I'm choosing to be optimistic about it because I believe Apple at their word that they care about the Mac. And caring about the Mac means caring about the MacBook and the notebook line. And so I think they'll get it straightened out. I just hope it's sooner rather than later.
I think we'll have some really good Mac stuff by the end of the year. I do.
I hope so.
I do. I mean, I don't think they're going to give you the keyboard you want, but I think there's going to be some updates to the line. I think that there's going to be some
like the Mac Mini thing. Like, my home entertainment Mac Mini is like holding on by a thread. But my wife has a first generation MacBook from 2015, and it's out of warranty now, and it is a bit of a dog. And so like, I would like to replace that with something for her. And I was thinking about even like the 2-port MacBook Pro. It's not much bigger and much heavier. It lives docked with a screen. I thought, well, maybe that'll be nice. But I'm holding off because I don't want to do something and then there'd be like an obvious answer, in too much time. So I feel like people are in that situation, or some people are just holding on to see what happens. And, they miss back to school. That's come and gone, but maybe they can have it for the holiday season.
Do you wanted to make a point about services?
I do. It's just been a thought that's been like rattling around in my mind. And Jason wrote in his, which is linked, where we're pulling all these numbers from. He wrote this paragraph about services that was really interesting. And the gist of it was, Jason, I think like the two of us are very product focused in our Apple coverage and analysis. And like actually like tweeted yesterday, like I just have quit reporting on quarterly earnings because I don't find it interesting and it's time consuming. But he said this and it really popped out at me. I'm going to read just for a second, so forgive me. But the discussion of services, especially in a financial context, is essentially a conversation about how Apple can grind more money out of every single person who uses an iPhone, iPad, and Mac. And I think he hit on what's been bothering me about services the last couple of quarters. It's great to see it growing. It's Apple talks about Apple Music subscribers, but also in there you have iCloud paid subscriptions, right? People purchasing more storage. And I don't know the breakdown between those two things, but it's in there somewhere. And the Apple Music thing doesn't fall into this category, right? Like if you want to pay for streaming music, Apple has a good product. I use it, you use it. I'm very happy with it. But the services that fall into the category of, hey, you're out of iCloud space because we give you 5 gigs. That's where this idea of like grinding people to a fine dust, like that's really where it bugs me. And it may be too that I've had several conversations. I have a text message right now from my brother-in-law who his wife's phone is, out of iCloud space and he thought he paid for it, but I think he just paid for it on his account. They don't have a family plan. Like, I'm going to go fix it for them this weekend. Like, people run into this, and I still believe Apple should up the 5 gigabyte plan. But the flip side of that coin is, well, if they do, their services revenue goes down because people pay to have more space because they're out of space because 5 gigs is pathetic. And there's just something in there that makes me uncomfortable because it's not a consumer first, consumer friendly thing. And Apple generally is pretty consumer friendly. We complain about a lot of stuff, but at the heart of it, I think Apple's a company that really cares about its users. But this is like a big stick in that eye to say, well, not everywhere. Is that unfair?
No, because it's weird, right? It's not unfair. It is a weird thing. It's like the conversation of, we all would love them to change the default space or make the iCloud stuff cheaper. So they can't. They cannot do it because their stock price will go down. Now, if they care about that, it depends what they care about most. I mean, they can do it, but the stock price will go down. So it's up to them, really, isn't it? Because so much of the share price right now is focused on the growing market, like whatever they're growing in. And they're not really growing in anything else significantly. Services is the thing they're growing in. There is a huge TV-shaped elephant in the room, right? Which is even kind of just like openly discussed on the conference call. Tim's just like, we have some stuff that we're working on in that area. We've hired some executives. We're really excited. I mean, it's because, me and Jason talk about this a lot on Upstream, which is a segment on Upgrade, where we look at kind of streaming services and the news that's going on within them. And, Apple can't hide what they're doing because that's not how the entertainment industry works, right? Like, people announce when the agents announce to Variety and Deadline and The Hollywood Reporter when a new show has been picked up by Apple because that's how the industry works, right? So, like, everyone knows they're working on a service. I mean, Apple even announced their deal with Oprah, right? Like, and TV stuff was part of that. And that's kind of what was spoken about in the call. Oprah was spoken about in the call because it's the biggest deal that they've done. And this is another part of the services revenue, but this is an add-on. This is the thing you don't need. But it's the problem when there's stuff that you need for your devices and they're charging you for them and they're not changing the prices of them, probably because it will impact this part of the earnings report.
Yeah. And I wonder if I can be optimistic in saying that if Apple Video, whatever it's called, is successful and they're just raking in money, then they can give a little bit on the iCloud storage.
It depends. Right? It depends on the opinions of who makes those decisions. Because if the person that makes that decision is like, well, why don't we just keep all this money as opposed to making some. And the thing is, it's like, it's not a bad thing. It's business. Like, it's not.
Oh yeah, Apple's not a charity, and I'm
yeah.
not saying they should run like one, but in a portfolio of products that are generally pretty customer friendly, this stands out to me.
Right, but then it's like historically customer friendly. Still customer friendly, but has been in the past. Depends who's making those decisions. I'm not trying to point a finger at Tim Cook here, because I don't know if he's the one making these decisions. Like, but someone is, and we don't know if that person's opinion is different to the people that came before them.
Mm-hmm.
Earnings, kids. See, we always say this. There's always some interesting stuff in there somewhere. You just
there is,
gotta
but it's
mine
funny
for it.
in these conversations we're talking about products. You know,
Yeah.
like,
well, because
that's
the
where
earnings shine information on the products, right? So the reason I feel like I'm the only person in our friend group that is genuinely interested in the earnings. Everybody else like kind of reports on them or begrudgingly does something with them and like, oh, I hate doing this every time. But I find it genuinely interesting because I find out how many products are sold. Like, that tells me what people are buying. It tells me what people are interested in.
Yeah. Well, except for the Apple Watch. It's still on a Bezos chart.
Well, they don't give us
more
the numbers,
than ever,
but
Myke.
they give us data. But more than ever is a good thing to know, right?
Yes.
So I find it interesting. I look forward to getting this information because it's the only information that we get. So I like it, even though, yes, I know it can be boring to look at 4-quarter rolling averages and year-over-year projections and stuff. But I also kind of like some of that stuff. Anyway, today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Pingdom. Pingdom are amazing because they help keep your site and the sites you love online and responsive. Pingdom monitor your site so you don't have to, giving you real-time feedback so you know exactly what's going on at all times, because things break on the internet constantly. Every month, Pingdom detects around 13 million outages. That's more than 400,000 every single day. Regardless of whether you have a site with one page or you're managing a complete infrastructure, it is important to monitor the availability and performance of that site, because if you have something on the internet, don't you want it to be available? You don't want your site to be down. You don't want to have to find out because somebody has sent you a tweet or an email, and that's why you need Pingdom. You just give them the URL that you want to monitor, and they'll take care of the rest with their 70 global test servers that emulate visits to your site, checking its availability as often as every minute. Go to pingdom.com/relayfm right now for a 14-day free trial. No credit card required to do that. And then when you sign up, use the code CONNECTED at checkout to get a huge 30% off your first invoice. Our thanks to Pingdom for their support of this show and Relay FM. So tell me about your second MacBook Pro. Do you like it?
I do. Yeah, so I'd purchased an entry model. We talked about this, and I very quickly realized that was not what I should have done.
You have such poor grasp of your own desires for purchases.
It's true. Well, so this time I was like, oh, I don't want to spend that much money.
No, I know.
So let me cheap out.
I know, but I think
cheap
you need
out.
You can't cheap out on yourself. Yeah. So woo.
Let me spend just shy of $2,000 instead of just over it. So anyway, I ended up with a pretty loaded one, i7, 16 gigs RAM, terabyte SSD, and it's really good. Like, no keys have fallen off yet, so I got that going for me. Actually, so I used a backpack this trip that I haven't used in a while, and I found the iKey that had fallen off my 2016 MacBook Pro.
Oh.
And so I think about getting it framed, like a shadow box or something.
Did you get scared for a second? Did you think your iKey had fallen off?
I did. First, I was like, "Oh, you got to be kidding me!" Oh, wait.
Already?
Come on, it's brand new. So anyway, the aforementioned video, I edited on this machine in Final Cut Pro. I did some stuff in Logic. I took everything that I could throw at it, and it was totally fine. What has me most excited about this is that I can have a quad-core 13-inch machine. I prefer 13 inches while traveling because it's just a lot less bulky and easier, lighter. But dual core just doesn't really cut it when it comes to my sorts of workloads as like a audio professional and like video amateur. You know, I need horsepower. I didn't want to say video professional. I don't think I am one of those yet, but
no, I think it works.
Yeah, please like and subscribe. So, I mean, it's really nice. Battery life seems pretty good. I didn't include that in my write-up because I don't really know for sure, but it seemed like I used it some in the airport just doing like admin stuff, and it was hard to like wear the battery down. It rendering and stuff in Final Cut was, what I expected. The iMac Pro has ruined me in a degree because very few computers are faster than this one that Apple sells, but it's way faster than my 2015. The thing that really impresses me about this machine, and it impressed me about the iMac Pro when I got it, is the disk speed. Like these SSDs are so fast, and that makes everything faster. Like having footage that you need to import, or APFS does some of this, right, moving things around, but like just anytime you have to touch the file system, it feels like it's instant, and that makes just everything better. Apple's really, I don't think it's talked about as much. They're really killing it in SSD territory. It's expensive if you need 2 or 4 terabytes, but that T2 chip and the modules they're using really scream, and that makes everything happier.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds like this is the machine that you're looking for now. I think it's great that you've been able to move back to a smaller size, right, with the additional power, right, that you don't have to compromise the size that you want for the power you need. I think that's a good thing. I think that's clearly for you the best thing that's come out of this.
And I really honestly don't feel like I'm missing out by not having a 6-core.
Right.
Like it's so much better than where I was. And like granted this video was a 1080 timeline, but most of the footage except for the selfie footage was 4K. And so it was a mixed environment in Final Cut, and it just blew through it. And I feel like anything I would need to do on the road, because when I'm at home, I mean, the machine basically just sits on my desk, and I use it some, like at the coffee shop or something. But I'm not doing production work on my laptop except when I travel. And I feel like the balance is finally right. I can have the size that I want, and it be powerful enough to do what I need to do. I honestly don't feel like I'm missing out by not having the 15.
Yeah, well, that's good then, right? Like,
yeah,
that's good.
I'm really happy.
Because then you get the space back, you get the weight back, right? And
yeah,
I mean, 13-inch laptops I like more than 15s, because 15s feel really big. Like, they just feel really big. So yeah, cool. I'm pleased you're happy with it.
Yeah, man. So far, so good.
I bought 2 things on Prime Day.
Oh no!
Yeah.
What have you done?
Well, no, they're good things. I bought an espresso machine, like a full-on. It's called the Sage Barista Express. It's like does the whole thing. It does the grinding, it extracts the espresso, does the foam milk
fancy
thing. Yeah, we've wanted this for a while, and we got a pretty good deal on it for Prime Day. I don't remember how much it was.
Is it Vitici approved?
He was I sent him a picture, and he was very, very excited about my purchase.
Good.
Yeah.
Then you've not made a terrible
mistake. He said that looks very Italian.
That's all you need.
Yep. That was all I wanted, really. Like,
how big is this thing?
Not as big as it looks. It's big.
It looks massive.
It looks huge, but it's not as big as it looks. Like, it is big. It takes up a pretty significant size on the counter. But it's fine, and I'm happy with it. Like, it's a good machine. It's something we've wanted for a while. I don't make, and I won't make all of my coffee with this because it's like a whole thing. It's very messy. It's like a whole thing.
Yeah, this seems like I have some time. I can fire this thing up.
It's like a weekend thing. I've been doing a lot of it this week because it's my new toy, right? And I'm trying to kind of get good at it.
Sure.
But I'm ultimately going to stick to my cold brew kit or my AeroPress or whatever for the majority, because it generates so much mess, and like it's involved. It takes me
shooting
like 10
steam
minutes.
Everywhere. There's coffee beans flying out the top.
And you got to clean the milk off the steam thing.
There's a
steam
tamper.
One. Yep, the tamper's a whole thing, and then you've got like the little blade. It's like it's a big thing. But what I wanted to talk about really was the fact that I bought.
Why is this in the show notes? What are you doing?
I bought a Roomba.
Ooh.
Yes, because it was like we've wanted a Roomba for a while, and there was a Prime Day deal to get the Roomba 960 30% off. We're like, okay, we could use some of the wedding present money, and we bought a Roomba. So we have a Roomba. I love the Roomba. The Roomba is great. The Roomba for me is like home automation at its finest, because you can, if you want to, program it to clean on a schedule. And that means you can start it to go whenever you want. this thing can be doing things like when you're not around. So like we could go out and then we could just start the Roomba to go off and clean. And that is like we have so much home automation stuff, but it's typically things that we're doing when we're there. All it's doing is taking a light switch from the wall and putting it with our voices, right? Like it's, you know, I mean, you can set these things on timers, but I think most of us, for the majority of the time, do not use automation for our home stuff.
Right. It's like, it's making it more accessible, but it's not truly automation.
More comfortable to use, but it's not. We're not automating it, except in certain circumstances, right? Like we were all talking about this a couple of days ago when we were all on our various trips. You set the lights on an automation thing, right? So they come on at night and go off in the morning, so it looks like you're home, etc., right? And it has an app, of course. So that's how you kind of set it off. The app is okay. You can tell it to clean. It gives you some basic information, but it also does this thing which is cool. It shows you a report on how the cleaning went. So you get a little map that the Roomba has drawn of your home.
Yeah, it wants your praise.
Well, I guess so. I'll get to the like anthropomorphizing of the Roomba in a minute, but it shows you like this map which you can kind of internally map to the root of your home, so you can see are there any rooms it's not getting and what parts of rooms is it not cleaning. So because this little robot that goes around the home, you have to make some considerations for it because there's some things it just can't do. Our one right now, I find this to be unbearably cute, which is again the way we think about this robot in our home right now. It kind of goes along the edge of the doorway and it knocks the doorstop away and then shuts itself in a room, which I think is like the cutest thing in the world, that the Roomba gets stuck in the bathroom. Mm-hmm. So, like with any animal that you have in your home, whether that be, let's say any living thing, so whether it's an animal or a child or a robot, you have to make some considerations for it. So like right now, we're like, are there different like doorstops that we can get that maybe it won't close the door on its own? We're not sure yet. Or like sometimes it gets all ruffled up in a rug and you have to help him out because he gets all stuck in the rugs. Or you can walk around the house and find like, that's not where that goes. Like, the Roomba moved it. Right? Which is, right now,
the HomePod?
Right now I have a problem that if the Roomba goes near my Wi-Fi, like my modem, whatever you call it, the base station, sometimes it pulls the Ethernet cable out a little bit. I'm like, all right, Roomba, we need to think about this.
You're being DDoSed by the Roomba.
It's doing something. It's like disconnecting itself from the Wi-Fi, I think it's trying to make an escape. So, these are just things that we're going to have to tweak some stuff in the home if we want this little thing to be walking around. Because what it's doing is it's moving around, just lightly bumping into things, right? That's what it does. And then it kind of understands where it's got to go, but it bumps into everything constantly, but it's not going fast enough that it does any damage. It's just like lightly bumping into stuff, which again is also part of the cuteness of this little machine. I find it unbearably adorable that when we turn it on, we hear like dunk, dunk, dunk. It's just funny as it's like bumping into every surface in our home. But we like it. It has Echo, Google Home, and IFTTT integration, so I can say, hey, Echo, tell the Roomba to start cleaning, and it goes doo-doo-doo, and then off it goes. And you can, in the same way that, like, when I thought that it might be getting stuck somewhere, I asked it to stop and come back, and it did. It came back, and it finds this little home. They have a little home that they go back to. Mm-hmm. This is like our weird robot pet now, which makes me, I want to buy googly eyes for it.
Please.
I've seen people do that.
Please do that.
Like to put googly eyes on Roombas, and we need to give the Roomba a name, which we have not got yet. And I have currently resisted putting some kind of musical device on it to make a DJ Roomba. I think the HomePod might kill it if I tried to put that thing
It's
on
really
there.
Heavy.
That would be the end of DJ
You want to
Roomba.
borrow my iPod Hi-Fi?
Yeah, I know. Kill it worse. That's got to be heavier than the HomePod,
It's going to
right?
knock over furniture in your house.
I don't think it would be able to move. But yeah, it's like, I really like this thing because it is doing exactly what we want, which is it's reducing the amount of vacuuming we need to do. Like, it does not eliminate the amount of vacuuming you need to do because it can't get all the edges and some stuff it just won't pick up. But it's reducing the amount that is required, right?
Right. Yeah, I think we've thought about it. I think why I have been hesitant is They are a little pricey, but
They are.
it's going to suck up all the kids' toys. Like, I'd have to work out a way for it to. Maybe it's just good at this. Like, children just leave things on the floor, just everywhere.
The clearance would never pick up anything meaningful.
Yeah. So maybe next time something goes on sale, I'll make a surprise purchase. But I'm glad you're enjoying it. I do think things like this.
Do you know they have a floor mopping robot now too?
What?
Yeah. So if you don't have if you have floors that need mopping rather than hoovering or vacuuming,
we have no carpet in our house at all.
There you go. So maybe you need the mopping robot.
Although this one, I'm looking on the Amazon page, we'll do hardwood. So I think it's fun. I think products like this are easy to put personality into. I remember a friend of mine got like the first room, but like when they first came out, who knows how many years ago, and like we just all like sat around and watched it.
Oh yeah,
like, it was better than TV because like look at it go. Like
the first time we set it off, I chased it around the house. Like, look at him, look at him. It was very fun for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I'm pleased with my Roomba purchase. It is
good.
I specifically wanted this one because it has the integrations.
Yeah.
Right? Like I am unwilling to buy a product of this price now for my home that does not integrate with smart services in some way. Like I won't do it. Like I just won't do it.
I think that's fair.
Because I feel like it really should. I mean, okay, my coffee maker doesn't, but it doesn't need to. It has that.
But that's also like an experience, right? Like I think there's a difference between vacuuming the floor and like making fancy coffee.
Yeah, because you can get coffee machines that have this stuff, but I don't want those coffee machines, right? Like they're the ones that have the pods or whatever, or like the all-in-one system that just spits out a coffee for you at the end. But like, no, I want to be getting the thing and tamping it down and doing the milk, and like I want to do that because that's the point of it. But yeah, I love the little Roomba. It's a nice addition to our home.
Good. Well, congratulations on your robot child.
Thank you so much. If you'd like to find the show notes, I don't do this bit. You do this bit. Wrap it up.
Do it. You're back. I think you should. No,
I don't want to do it.
Okay.
Do it.
If you want to find show notes this week, if you want to buy a Roomba and be cool like Myke, hashtag Myke was Roomba. So that doesn't have the same ring to it. We'll come up with something.
a W at the start, right? WROOMBA.
Ooh. Maybe. We'll see. Anyways, those links are in the app you're listening to right now or on the website relay.fm/connected/203. If you do visit the webpage, you can send us an email with any follow-up or feedback you may have, or you can find us on Twitter. Myke is there as IMYKE. You can find Myke on a bunch of shows at relay.fm/shows. I promise you'll find something there that you would like. You can find Federico. He's the editor-in-chief of MacStories.net, and he is on Twitter as VITICCI. You can find me there as ISMH or at 512pixels.net. We'd like to thank our sponsors this week, Hover, Pingdom, and Inboard Technology for making this episode possible. And until next time, Myke, say goodbye.
Cheerio.
Adios.